Just when the Olympians thought they had secured their rule, an even greater nightmare emerged. From the depths of the earth, Gaia unleashed her most terrifying child, a beast unlike any before, taller than mountains, with fire-breathing heads and wings that could blacken the sky. This was Typhon, the doom of the gods, and for the first time in history, Olympus would tremble in fear. The battle against the giants was over, but the scars of war remained. The once mighty Olympus stood fractured, its golden halls darkened by the echoes of conflict. The gods celebrated their victory, yet Zeus sat alone, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Something was wrong. He could feel it. The war had been too easy, too soon to be over. Gaia, the primordial mother of the earth, seethed with rage. She had watched her children, the giants, fall one by one at the hands of the Olympians. Her heart burned with vengeance. The gods had no idea what they had awakened. The gigantomachy was never meant to be her final strike. No, she had one last creation, one that would bring Olympus to its knees. Deep within the molten veins of the earth, something stirred, a force unlike any before it. The mountains trembled, the seas roared, and the very sky darkened. Zeus' unease turned to dread as a deep, guttural sound echoed from the depths. It was not the voice of a giant. It was something far worse. The gods would soon learn the price of their arrogance. Typhon was awakening. Gaia's fury was relentless. She had given everything to the giants, but they had failed. The gods had proven too strong, but she was not finished. She would not rest until Olympus had crumbled and Zeus lay broken beneath her feet. The Titans had failed her. The giants had failed her. But now, she would forge a terror beyond any that had ever existed. Deep within the hidden veins of the earth, where molten rivers flowed like blood and darkness had never known light, she summoned the raw essence of chaos. From the fire of Tartarus, the storms of the heavens, and the hatred of the earth itself, she shaped her final child. A being so immense, so destructive, that no force in the cosmos could stand against it. Typhon was born. The earth trembled as he took his first breath. His very presence disrupted the balance of the world. Oceans surged, mountains cracked, the sky darkened, as if the universe itself recoiled in horror. And then, he emerged. His form was beyond comprehension, an abomination that defied the natural order. He towered over the highest mountains, his body so vast that he could blot out the sun. 100 dragon heads sprouted from his shoulders, each one hissing, growling, and speaking in different tongues, their voices a chaotic chorus of destruction. His eyes burned like twin suns, filled with the molten fury of the earth's core. His lower half was a tangle of massive serpents, each one as large as a river, writhing and coiling with a mind of its own. His wings, vast and black, stretched from horizon to horizon, able to engulf the world in shadow. With every movement, he spewed flames hotter than Hephaestus' forge, setting the sky ablaze. But Typhon was not a mindless beast. He was intelligent, cunning, and filled with a deep, burning hatred for the gods. He did not just crave destruction, he craved dominion. This was no simple war. This was a reckoning. With each step he took, the very foundations of the world cracked beneath his might. Gaia had whispered to him of his purpose, of his destiny, to tear down Olympus, to rip the gods from their thrones, and to remake the cosmos in his image. And so, Typhon rose from the depths, his voice shaking the very fabric of existence. With a roar that shattered the heavens, he began his march toward Olympus. The gods had no idea what was coming. Typhon had awakened, and the world trembled beneath his fury. With every step, the ground split apart. Rivers turned to steam, mountains crumbled, and the sky itself seemed to shrink away in fear. His 100 dragon heads screamed in unison, their voices shaking the very fabric of the cosmos. Fire rained from his mouths, turning forests to ash and boiling the seas. Nothing could stop him, and now he had set his sights on Olympus. The gods had ruled unchallenged since the defeat of the Titans. They had faced rebellions, monsters, and wars, but never had they known true terror. Now, as Typhon ascended the sacred mountain, that terror became real. Zeus stood on the steps of his throne, his eyes narrowing as he beheld the nightmare rising toward his domain. The air crackled with divine energy as he prepared his thunderbolts, the same weapons that had brought the Titans to their knees. But something was different. This was no mere foe. This was not a Titan or a giant. This was something else entirely, a being of raw destruction, a force that could not be reasoned with, bargained with, or simply overpowered. For the first time in his reign, Zeus felt it. Doubt. Before the monster could reach the peak, the gods launched their attack. Poseidon, lord of the seas, summoned tsunamis that crashed against Typhon's massive form. But the beast barely flinched. He laughed, a sound that split the sky, before his flames evaporated the waters in an instant. Ares, the god of war, charged forward, his golden spear aimed at the beast's heart. With the strength of 1,000 warriors, he struck. And then, with a single swipe of his claw, Typhon sent Ares hurtling across the heavens. Hera unleashed her divine power, commanding the winds to drive Typhon back. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, hurled her spear, aiming for one of his 100 eyes. The projectile struck true, but Typhon simply ripped it out and roared in defiance. Then came the moment that sent Olympus into chaos. Zeus, the king of the gods, hurled his thunderbolts. Each strike was powerful enough to obliterate mountains. They struck Typhon's monstrous body in bursts of blinding light. The heavens shook, the earth trembled, and the gods held their breath. But when the smoke cleared, Typhon was still standing. And then, he struck back. Typhon unleashed a storm unlike any before. His 100 heads breathed fire and lightning, sending waves of destruction crashing against Olympus. He swung his massive claws, shattering the golden gates of the god's palace. With a single stomp, the entire mountain quaked. Columns cracked, statues crumbled, and divine halls collapsed. The home of the gods was falling apart. Fear spread like wildfire. The gods, immortal and mighty, were faced with something they had never known before. Defeat. One by one, the Olympians fled. Poseidon abandoned his trident and vanished into the depths of the sea. Hera, the queen of Olympus, vanished in a flash of divine energy. Athena, swift and strategic, disappeared before Typhon could strike again. Even Ares, humiliated and beaten, retreated into the shadows. One by one, they ran. They fled to the farthest lands, seeking shelter where Typhon's wrath could not reach them. Many found refuge in Egypt, disguising themselves as animals to escape his fury. But one god did not flee. Zeus stood alone atop the crumbling mountain, staring into the burning eyes of the monster before him. He knew what had to be done. The battle was not over. Not yet. Olympus had fallen. The once mighty halls of the gods lay in ruin, their golden columns shattered, their thrones abandoned. The Olympians had fled, scattered across the earth, their divine forms disguised as animals in distant lands. All except one. Zeus stood alone. The king of the gods watched as Typhon ascended the final steps of Olympus, his monstrous form blotting out the sky. 100 dragon heads hissed and roared, their fangs dripping with fire and venom. His massive wings beat against the heavens, sending hurricane winds howling through the ruins of the god's home. Zeus knew there was no escaping this fight. This was it. Either he would defeat Typhon, or the reign of the Olympians would end forever. The storm god wasted no time. With a thunderous roar, he summoned the full force of his power. The sky ignited with lightning. The clouds twisted into a swirling vortex of divine fury. One by one, Zeus unleashed his thunderbolts, each one crackling with the energy that had once felled the Titans. Boom! The first bolt struck Typhon's chest, sending flames and smoke exploding in all directions. The second ripped through his left wing, tearing through flesh and bone. The third, the strongest of all, struck his central head, a direct hit. For a moment, the heavens stood still. The earth stopped shaking, and then Typhon laughed. It was a deep, guttural sound, like the shifting of tectonic plates. His wounds, if they could even be called that, began to heal almost instantly. He shook off the lightning as if it were nothing more than a summer breeze. His eyes burned brighter. His rage intensified, and then he attacked. Typhon lunged forward, his 100 heads snapping like vipers. Zeus barely dodged as a tidal wave of fire and venom erupted toward him. He darted through the air, narrowly avoiding the massive claws that swiped at him with the force of an earthquake. But Typhon was fast, faster than anything Zeus had ever faced. With one devastating strike, Typhon's claw slashed across Zeus' chest, sending the king of the gods hurtling through the ruins of Olympus. Lightning shattered in all directions as Zeus crashed through marble and gold, the very mountain trembling under his fall. Before he could recover, Typhon was upon him. His monstrous hands, large enough to crush entire cities, wrapped around Zeus and lifted him into the air. And then, in a moment that would be whispered in fear for eternity, Typhon did the impossible. He ripped Zeus' tendons from his body. The king of the gods screamed in agony. His divine strength drained from him in an instant. The golden cords of his power, his very essence, were torn away and cast aside like discarded trophies. Zeus collapsed, unable to stand, his body broken. Typhon had won. The monster did not kill Zeus immediately. No, he wanted him to suffer, to know that he had lost everything. Typhon carried Zeus, the once mighty king of the gods, to a remote cave, far beyond Olympus. There, he imprisoned him, bound in chains, hidden away where no one would find him. And with Zeus defeated, Typhon turned his attention to the rest of the world. With no gods left to oppose him, he laid waste to the land. Rivers dried up, forests burned, storms raged endlessly. The sky itself seemed darker, as if the light of Olympus had been extinguished forever. Mankind, who had once worshipped the gods, now cowered in terror, their prayers left unanswered. For the first time since the dawn of their rule, the gods had lost. But hope was not gone. Somewhere in the shadows, two figures watched and waited. Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, and Pan, the wild god of nature, knew that the time had come. They would not abandon Zeus. They would not let Olympus fall. They had to act. The war was far from over. Olympus had fallen. The king of the gods lay broken, his divine tendons torn from his body, his strength stripped away. Zeus, the ruler of the heavens, was now nothing more than a prisoner, locked away in a dark and desolate cave. Typhon reigned supreme. With Zeus defeated, the great monster had turned his wrath upon the world. Storms howled endlessly, oceans churned with chaos, and fires burned across the land. The gods had abandoned their thrones, and humanity suffered beneath the weight of divine silence. All hope seemed lost, but two gods had not given up. Hidden in the shadows, far from Typhon's fiery rampage, Hermes and Pan watched and waited. Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, was known for his speed and cunning. If anyone could move undetected, it was him. Pan, the wild god of nature, was no warrior, but he understood something few others did: fear. He could strike it into the heart of any being, even a monster as powerful as Typhon. Together, they devised a daring plan. They would do the unthinkable. They would steal back Zeus' strength. The tendons of Zeus, the source of his power, had been hidden away by Typhon, locked inside a massive stone chest deep within his lair. The cave, hidden in a remote and scorched valley, was guarded by serpents, fire, and shadows darker than the night itself. But Hermes was undeterred. With the speed of the wind, he slipped into the cave, moving faster than even the sharpest eyes could follow. The ground was hot, the air thick with the scent of ash and destruction. Every step was a risk. One misstep, one sound, and Typhon would descend upon him. At the heart of the cave, surrounded by smoldering bones and the wreckage of fallen warriors, Hermes found it, the chest that contained Zeus' tendons. But before he could grab them, the cave began to shake. Typhon was near. Outside the cave, Pan had been waiting for the signal, but he knew they needed a distraction, something that could shake even Typhon's confidence. So he did what he did best. He unleashed the power of panic. From the shadows, Pan let loose an ear-splitting, supernatural scream. A sound so terrifying, so unnatural, that it sent waves of fear crashing through the land. It echoed through the mountains, twisting Typhon's thoughts with uncertainty. For the first time in his existence, the great monster felt fear. He turned away, scanning the horizon, searching for an unseen threat. And in that moment of hesitation, Hermes struck. With a blur of motion, Hermes snatched the tendons from the chest and vanished into the wind. By the time Typhon realized what had happened, it was too late. Hermes and Pan were already gone, racing toward the hidden refuge where Zeus lay weak and broken. When they arrived, Zeus was barely conscious. His eyes flickered with the last remnants of his once mighty power. But the moment Hermes placed the tendons back into his hands, the air crackled with energy. A storm was coming. Zeus awoke. His body surged with divine strength, his skin glowing with raw power. The mountain shook beneath him as the king of the gods rose to his feet. His thunderbolts, once lost, now burned in his grasp. His reign had been threatened. His throne had been taken. But now, Zeus was back, and he had only one goal: to end Typhon once and for all. The skies over Olympus were dark, choked by storm clouds thick with rage. Thunder rumbled across the heavens, and lightning split the sky in jagged flashes. Zeus had returned. The king of the gods stood atop the ruined peak of Mount Olympus, his body radiating divine energy. His strength had been restored, his tendons reattached, his fury unmatched. Typhon had taken everything from him. Now, Zeus would take everything from Typhon. Far below, Typhon sensed the shift in power. His many heads snapped toward Olympus, their eyes burning with hatred. He had believed Zeus to be finished, crushed, and powerless. But now, the god stood tall once more. A monstrous roar erupted from Typhon's 100 mouths, shaking the earth. He beat his massive wings, sending hurricane-force winds tearing through the heavens. With a single bound, he launched himself straight toward Olympus, his titanic form blotting out the sky. Zeus did not wait. With a mighty cry of vengeance, he hurled a thunderbolt so powerful it split the clouds apart. It struck Typhon midair, sending him crashing back down to the earth. The impact created a crater miles wide, shaking the very foundations of the world. But Typhon rose again. With unholy speed, he lunged at Zeus, his claws slashing through the sky. Zeus dodged, rolling to the side as another set of claws ripped through a mountain behind him, reducing it to rubble. The battle raged on, shaking the cosmos. For the first time, the gods returned. One by one, they emerged from their hiding places. Poseidon raised his trident, summoning torrential floods to weaken Typhon's footing. Apollo unleashed arrows of pure sunfire, striking the beasts' monstrous heads. Hera and Athena worked together, calling forth tempests and divine magic to hinder Typhon's movements. The gods had fled before, but now they stood beside their king. But the battle was far from over. Typhon was still too strong. His many heads snapped and spat fire, pushing back even the combined strength of the Olympians. For every wound they inflicted, he seemed to regenerate. Zeus had to end this. Gathering all his divine might, he rose high above the battlefield, summoning a storm unlike any before. The air crackled with energy as lightning coiled around him, forming into a single, unstoppable force of destruction, the strongest thunderbolt ever forged. The sky turned white as Zeus hurled the bolt with every ounce of his power. It struck Typhon dead center. For the first time, Typhon screamed in pain. The divine energy coursed through his monstrous form, burning through his many heads, tearing through his body, weakening him at last. Typhon staggered, his body collapsing, his flames dimming. The gods pressed their attack, striking him over and over until finally, Zeus struck one final time. With a mighty swing of his thunderbolt, he sent Typhon crashing down beneath the earth. Defeated, Zeus did not just kill him. He imprisoned him forever beneath Mount Etna. The mountain sealed him away, his monstrous body trapped within its molten core. To this day, when Etna erupts, it is said to be Typhon's rage still burning beneath the earth. Olympus was saved. The gods had reclaimed their throne. The world had been spared from destruction. Zeus had proven once again why he was king of the gods. But this battle had changed everything. The Olympians knew now they were not invincible. There were forces even greater than them. And one day, perhaps, another challenger would rise. The battle was over. Olympus still stood, but it bore the scars of war. The once glorious halls of the gods were cracked and broken, the golden gates twisted and blackened by fire. The gods had won, but at what cost? Zeus had reclaimed his throne, proving once more that he alone was king of the gods. But as he stood atop Mount Olympus, gazing down at the world below, he knew that something had changed. The gods had always believed themselves to be eternal, untouchable, but Typhon had shattered that illusion. Though Zeus had struck the final blow, he knew that Typhon could never truly be destroyed. A being of such raw chaos could not be erased from existence. It could only be contained. And so, he cast Typhon deep beneath the earth, imprisoning him beneath Mount Etna. There, the monster would remain, trapped beneath layers of rock and molten fire, his rage forever boiling beneath the surface. Even today, when Etna erupts, it is said to be Typhon's fury, his endless struggle to break free. For the first time, the Olympians truly understood the fragility of their rule. The Titans had challenged them. The giants had risen against them, but Typhon had nearly destroyed them. Hera, once the proud queen of Olympus, now carried the weight of the gods near defeat. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, pondered the lesson they had learned. Power alone was not enough to ensure their reign. Poseidon, the mighty god of the sea, had faced a force even his waves could not conquer. He wondered, what other terrors lay beyond the reach of Olympus? And Zeus? Zeus had won, but even he felt uneasy. For all his power, for all his victories, he had been brought to the brink of defeat. Typhon had wounded him, humiliated him, nearly erased him. If not for Hermes and Pan, he would have lost. Would another monster rise? Would another force, greater than Typhon, come for Olympus one day? The thought lingered. Though defeated, Typhon's influence never faded. His rage still fuels the world's natural disasters. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and violent storms. His vengeance echoes through the ages, a reminder that even the gods can be challenged. Mortals whispered his name in fear, warning their children that the land itself could turn against them at any moment. Even the gods, for all their power, never dared to forget the horror of the battle. The gods had won, but for how long? Zeus turned his gaze toward the heavens, gripping his thunderbolt tightly. Olympus had survived this war, but deep in his heart, he knew, one day, the gods would face another reckoning. Would they be ready? Only time would tell.